Hi, welcome to Miss Richardson's U.S. History 5-Minute Lectures. This information will be U.S. Notes 5.6, Organize Your Information. It includes information that aligns with the first section on your Unit 1 study guide, or your Unit 5 study guide. Remember, you have control over this, so pause whenever you need to, write down the questions you have, rewatch if you need, and make sure you always use your study guide when you're taking notes. So let's go ahead and get started. So I actually want you to look at your study guide. At this point in the unit, we've covered the material on African American civil rights from your study guide. I want you to look at all the terms and people and make sure you know them. Those terms and people are Jim Crow laws, integration, desegregation, nonviolent protest, the NAACP, Brown versus Board of Education, Rosa Parks, the Montgomery bus boycott, the SCLC, Martin Luther King Jr., Little Rock Nine, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, CORE, which we did in class but was not in your notes, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Black Power, the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, and Stokely Carmichael. So now that you've looked at those and made sure that you know each term and each person, and if you haven't done that, go back and do that, I want you to look at the 4 questions below the terms. The 5th question is about the women's movement, and we haven't covered that yet. We'll cover that this week. So are you able to answer each of the 4 questions on the civil rights movement with details? Here they are. Describe key events and important figures in the civil rights movement. What was the role of court cases in the civil rights movement? What changes occurred in the civil rights movement, and what contributed to those changes? And evaluate the effectiveness of the civil rights movement in accomplishing its goals. So make sure you can answer each of those with some details from your notes and from class. And once you can do that, finally look at the guiding question at the start of the section of the study guide. Remember, this could be your essay question for the unit. So the question is, analyze the differing views regarding civil rights from 1954 to 1980. So can you answer that at least partially, talking about African American civil rights at this point? What would your thesis be right now if you had to write that? What would you have each paragraph cover? What details can you use to support your answer? Those are the sorts of things you should be asking yourself now while that information is fresh in your mind and making notes of, so that when the essay comes along, you're ready for it if that's the one you choose. So every week when you finish your notes, you should really be going back with your study guide and doing this. If you go back each week and review the information, making sure you have all the material before the weekly quiz, you'll be more prepared not only for the quizzes, but also for the unit test, because you will have studied along the way. So that's the end of Notes 5.6 that weren't really notes. However, hopefully you learned something and you continue to use these strategies as we move forward. So I'll see you in class tomorrow.